You're a real estate agent that's wondering how to answer the biggest and most pressing questions that buyers and sellers have right now. This is the video for you. I'm joined by David Childers with Keeping Current Matters, and we're going to break down exactly how to answer these questions and set the stage by answering these questions to have your best year ever in 2025. All right, David, always good to catch up with you, kind of see these
Yeah.
things. You know what? I mean, this is the thing. We were kind of joking about this, but purposefully, not on purpose, but it works out good that you got a white shirt on and I've got a little hoodie on today. The last video we did, the comment that somebody put in there, so this is basically the same guy. Cool. I mean, that owned me. I'm gonna be honest. I mean, I know when I texted to you, we didn't talk about it, but my gosh, that owned me. So yeah, not the same guy. David
I got this
Childers,
little thing on my
Keeping Current
head too,
Matters.
so
Yes.
that'll kind of separate us. So
Yeah, no, man, this is always good. You've always got the best stuff. And kind of interesting. Here we are as we're recording this. We're now past the election. And
yep,
so some clarity starting to come, at least in a direction we're headed. A lot of
yeah,
things going to be going on through the holidays, into the year. A lot of questions. I mean, I think that
yeah,
agents are getting a lot of questions. And so, as you and I were talking about this, I would love just to kind of go through some of those questions that you anticipate that you're going to have agents having, and just how to answer some of those with some facts and some statistics that will really give a educated answer to some of these.
yeah,
If that sounds
yeah.
good to you.
I think Jimmy. I think the next few weeks, and like you said, it's the second week in November right now, and over the next whatever it's going to be, 5, 6, 7 weeks, we'll see more people than we've probably seen all year long. Right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, Thanksgiving deal or whatever it is, church gathering, whatever you're going to do, all the things that come up between now and the end of the year, and people have questions, right? What's going on in the market? Everybody's got an opinion about real estate that will come up, but so I think it's not a not a better time to really kind of think about what are those questions that'll come up. How do I answer them from a fact-based perspective? And the other thing I'll say is we're a week past the election. And one of the things that's kind of funny, maybe, in my respect, is people have kind of said, okay, how long do you think it's going to take for people to stop talking about that? How long does it take to get back to normal? And the thing that I always think about is, how long did it take last time, for people to stop talking about the election? It take about 4 years, roughly on my count. But
Right.
things will settle down. And I want to remind people another thing too. We've lived through the last week. We've seen a jobs report come out. We've seen inflation come out. The Fed has met, and we've had a presidential election. A little bit going on over a
Yeah.
7-day period.
Mhm.
And certainly our business is not immune to that. I think a lot of the uncertainty is what we're seeing. And I think one of the questions, probably the first one we could start off with, if you want to, if you agree with this, and maybe we can, you from a agent's perspective, but I think a lot of people are wondering is when will rates come down? You agree?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's the biggest question the majority of the buyers have out there.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had this kind of period where everybody has been like, it's been one thing or another that people have been waiting on. We're going to wait until the election's over. We're going to wait until mortgage rates come down. We're going to wait until the end of the year. Whatever it is, people have just been almost like, we went through the pandemic where everybody was trying to everything they were doing is they were working to find a way and a time to buy. And now we've been like, it's in this holding period.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as the dust begins to settle now on a lot of these questions, one of the ones that's still out there is obviously mortgage rates. So I'd love to get your perspective on this as far as what are you anticipating? And obviously, nobody knows what's coming, but we can begin to start seeing a direction we're heading at least.
Yeah, so let me talk about that for a second. And I will give you can link to it the notes of this, the slides of projections and things. I will tell you projections are that rates will come down in the next year. That is it. Now, by how much and when is the question. Let me talk more about what we've seen over the last week. A couple of
That'd be
things.
great.
One, the enormous amount of uncertainty has caused the bond market to sort of skyrocket through this. And that's really relative to what's going to happen. Now we know who's elected. Now we're in a little bit different time. The Fed is already cut the Fed funds rate one time in the fall when we saw, this meeting, the 1st of November, they cut rates again, but we haven't seen the relief on mortgage rates that many people would like. If anything, we've seen a little bit of a run up in the last couple of weeks. couple of reasons for that. Now we have a Republican that's been elected president, and I'll tell you what the market has essentially said about this. You could see it in some of the reactions. Is that the market sort of has been up on the news, and the bond market has been up even more. And what it essentially means is the market's fearful from some of the things that Trump has said he's going to do with tariffs and other things to stimulate business, that it would sort of fan the flames of inflation. That's the fear right now. Now, time will tell to see, is that going to happen? But long-term mortgage rates are always going to be the enemy of inflation. If inflation kicks back up, then we won't see rates come down. So that's the question at hand right now, and some of that is probably based upon your political perspective. Some of that's based upon what happens, but you better believe that the Fed's eye is on housing, and I believe overall the world is going to be very mindful of what happens with mortgage rates. But there's sort of a few paths that could happen. One is, we get back into an inflationary economy. I don't know if that's a likely path. One, business is stoked, but we don't see that inflationary economy, or nothing happens on the business front, which I don't think is likely. I think it's one of the first two. But I think it's safe to say, if you look at projections, I'll share those with folks. They can download them, that we'll see a better mortgage rate environment going into 2025.
Yeah. And by the way, we will have all of these slides available down in the comment section if you're watching this on YouTube. And if anywhere you're watching this, it's going to be on YouTube. We're going to have those. Reach out to me, reach out to David. We'll get these to you if you'd like to have those. David, I think one of the things that you had mentioned a couple of months ago that I've really listened to as well is the one thing we can anticipate is volatility. Just with everything that's there. And we've seen that. And that probably continues, I would think, as we have these, times. I mean, we're in such a 24-hour news cycle right now. It's almost like it's skittish a little bit, that any news is exaggerated in both directions. We almost saw it move too quickly down when we saw it a month and a half ago, get down, dipping around 6% on mortgage rates, to now it's almost like we're seeing an overreaction. And it's like the volatility is just increasing, I guess you could say. Does that make sense to you as well?
Yeah, I think we're coming out of a week where there's been a tremendous amount of volatility. I think it will start to come down. I think there will be more knowns. I think it will become clear what the impact and what actually happens and changes that the new administration makes. That will all become clear, right? But between here and January, probably more volatility rather than less, because it's based upon speculation. We don't know yet. But as we go into next year, that'll get clear.
Yeah, and listen, I think the thing we always talk about is affordability, and obviously interest rates play a big part of that, but pricing does that as well. So I think one of the questions we're going to see is what will it take for prices to come down or to adjust down a little bit? What's your opinion on that?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I was the end of last week, I was in New York, and I was at an event, excuse me, that Lance Lambert hosted. Lance is the former editor for Fortune magazine for their housing department. Really, really good in all of his analysis of the markets. And I would say, honestly, that the mood of that event was less optimistic from a data perspective. Now, I think you're looking at a lot of, sort of data nerds, if you will, in that deal. But the couple of things that we can tell right now is inventory is growing in most markets.
Right.
Days on market is growing in most markets. And affordability is the challenge, right? So all of that leads to fewer transactions. That's going to be the story of 2024 when we wrap it up, right? Fewer transactions because of the cost equation. So the thing that you have to understand is the dynamic in housing. The number one topic in that event in New York was inventory. How are we going to solve the inventory crisis in this country? And there was folks there, some very, really interesting things that people are doing, from kind of a startup that's trying to make assumable mortgages easier. I was like, oh, that's a good idea, right? If we could you could assume that 2.5 30-year fix, you sell that house in a heartbeat, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I think assumable mortgages, all the things that we know, but affordability is the issue. The reason, or inventory is the issue, which leads to a lack of affordability. Here's what I know: that issue is not going to be solved overnight or in the next 12 months. Because we're in that issue, upward pressure is still going to be there for prices in the majority of the country. Maybe not down in Miami, maybe not in Austin, Texas. There are some outlier markets, but in the majority of the markets, we'll see very normal and healthy price appreciation. Somewhere, most forecasters say in 2025 between 3 and 4%. The other topic that was a big topic at that event was rising insurance premiums.
Florida,
your state leads the way, in premiums, having basically doubled in the last several years.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge, but I think prices, people that we're sitting around Thanksgiving dinner, somebody says, what, I don't think this market's going to last, and prices are going to come down. I don't see it. I think you have to help people understand that because there's been fewer available homes for people to buy, that's kept pressure on prices, and that's been the story. And anything, I'm curious to what you're seeing right now in the market, Jimmy. Yeah. But in most markets that I go to, if it's priced right, it's going to sell.
Absolutely, it's still that way. Even here, as we've seen inventories in Northwest Florida, specifically the Destin 30A, Panama City Beach markets along the coast. One thing that we really watched last week was the day after the election in a area where we would typically see maybe 20 homes come on the market on a day. We had 90 homes come on the market. Wow. The day after the election.
The day after the election?
Yeah, and the absorption rate is just not there to absorb that right now. We are actually seeing in our market, an increase in that inventory as we've seen the last year and a half, almost 2 years now, on those things. So I think this is where it becomes critically important for an agent to understand their local market, because you may be in an area where inventory is still so tight that it's a multiple offer situation. I talked to some people a few weeks ago, or you may be in an area where you're actually seeing some softening in pricing because of the increase in inventory. It's just simple supply and demand, as we've always talked about. If we have less demand, we've had less transactions this year, and we have in our market increased inventory. Well, it's a recipe for seeing some pullbacks. The pricing, in my opinion, in like our market has been extremely resilient in certain pockets, because everything that would make a lot of sense economically, you've still seen those values holding up. And what we're seeing here is the premiums properties are still demanding a premium price. Yeah, and the properties that are sitting on the market longer are either priced incorrectly, or they need the work done, and people are just, in other words, it's a more difficult market. I don't mean to typecast this, but A properties still getting A prices. B properties are still a little slower, but they're still getting B prices. C, D, and even a little bit lower quality of properties, as far as location, as far as the amount of work that they need to be done, those are the places where we're seeing these pricing things. And I think diving down on your local pricing also gets you a better understanding, because when you have less transactions, it's the A properties that are actually selling. A lot of times, because you have less data, the ones that are actually selling are going to artificially maybe make you seem like the average price is staying higher. But when you dive down in a specific neighborhood, you may get a little bit different detail. So I think diving down right now and understanding your local market is critically important. But I agree with you. It is absolutely about the inventories in every single market.
And I would say consumers know, but most folks know that real estate's a good investment, right? Most people are going to buy. So that makes a lot of sense. I think
it's exciting going to next year, though, with everything that we're seeing, I think another question is going to be, am I able to afford to buy a home? If I decide to sell and buy, what does that look like? And I'd love to get your insight on that. And then I had a great example of this last week as well.
On affordability?
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah,
Like
I think
if
there's
I decide to move, am I going to be able to afford to buy a new home? Because obviously I'm trading out of something that maybe I've got a lot of equity in, but I've got a low interest rate on top of that.
yeah, I think that's the challenge, right? There's two issues right now in real estate relative to affordability. One is the existing home, the homeowner that sells, and I don't think there's a necessarily an affordability challenge for the homeowner. I think there's a why would I challenge, right? Why
Yeah,
would
that's
I
good.
go out
That's good.
and buy another home because I'm likely going to get something that I don't like as much and I'm going to pay more for it, right? It doesn't take much to understand that. And so I think that will be the area that as we see rates come down, that will change for folks. Now, the question is, where will they come to? Five, 5.5, whatever we can get to maybe in 2025. And that may even be 5.5 may be an outside chance right now. But let me
Hmm.
be honest with that based on what I'm seeing in the market. So I think there's a why would I challenge with that. Now, the first time buyer, that's largely an affordability challenge. And there are two things that are going to be critically important, but three things that matter in affordability. We've talked about this a lot: the price, the mortgage rate, and then how much somebody's making. And we know people are making more. We know mortgage rates are going to come down. We know prices are rising at a more normal and healthy rate. So my message to anybody that's thinking about buying next year is, what are you doing to prepare for it now?
Good.
Right?
Hmm.
All of the things. Even today, Jimmy, we're recording this on Veterans Day. You're in an area in the Panhandle of Florida where there's a tremendous amount of
Yeah.
folks that are veterans or active that can use their VA benefit. There's a website. I'll give it to you, and folks can write this down. You can put it in the notes as well. It's called downpaymentresource.com. Phenomenal
Right.
resource that a buddy of mine, Rob Crane, started, gosh, 15, 20 years ago. And he's aggregated by zip code every grant, every down payment resource that's available. So it's
What a great.
educating yourself on what can you get, what are the loan products that allow you to buy, and there's a ton of them out there, right? You and I both know
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be, if you're a young person right now thinking about trying to buy your first house, you gotta be a little bit more savvy. You got to figure out what the products are and the things that you have that you can use. And kind of going back to those C or D properties, that's what I'd be buying right now.
Yeah.
Right. You know
I
what I mean?
agree.
With something you can fix up, something you can put a little bit of sweat equity in and move on.
Well, and I think, David, I think back to like the first house that I bought after I got married. It needed a ton of work when we kind of just assumed that. And I think we've gotten to a place where a lot of people are, um, I think that they just want everything immediately instead of bringing into the market. And I think that's almost a little bit of an attitude. So let me give some agent tips on this, especially going into this, what I believe next year. A couple of things. One that I saw I thought was brilliant the way she was doing this. Number one is let's get back to some basics here and start doing some first time homebuyer seminars.
Yeah.
Typically, a lot of times when we were doing those, and what we saw before, the craziness that's happened the last few years, the foundational part of that is that you were having the opportunity to start planning people for that process. And so if you're thinking that and you're anticipating that rates will, come down somewhat this next year, the process of having a first time homebuyer seminar where you've got someone that's involved with credit repair, you've got someone that has 6 months left on their lease, and
Right.
preparing them and basically now setting the table for those opportunities for the agent in the next year to help those folks find their first home. Now's the time to be doing those things. And let
Yeah.
me speak to that group of people that have a house, they have a low, they have some equity, they have a low interest rate. Like you said, why would I do this? There's an agent out in North Carolina that basically was coming in, and she was doing Greenville, North Carolina. It's Emily McAllister. I had an interview with her yesterday, and she was doing something where she had typically when we'd host an open house, you'd have a lender come in and tell you, here's what the payment would be,
Right. Yeah.
based
Yeah.
on the down payment. Well, what she did is she took it an extra step, and she said, if you bought a home prior to 2021 in Greenville, obviously you have equity. and she's standing in front of a next up house. I guess you could say it's not the first time home buyer, it's that second house. And she said, could you, if you bought a house prior to 2021, you could own this house behind me with a payment less than $2,000 with a few, if you're in that situation. And she just talks about utilizing that equity. She had a lender come in, so she does all her disclosures where she talks about, hey, look, if you were to roll in the equity you probably have, that you could have this house. So now she's visualizing where they could come in with a payment that was similar and showing that next step. I think this is the thing is we're in an environment where if we're going to show people and they're in this, why would I? Well, you have to give them the ability to see that next step forward where they don't have to take the step. You show it to them before they even have to take that step. So I think those are some things that are going to be helpful for agents too.
I think that's a big piece. I want to go back to something you said. I think the key to that is using real numbers.
Yes.
Right. The average, buyer that I'm working with right now has $250,000 in equity, and they can get in this house for less than $2,000. Whatever the real, because that makes it real. Then we can talk about you have an enormous amount of equity, or you have $250,000 of equity. Like using the real numbers makes people go, okay, I can sort of visualize it.
Right. And it's one of those. It's almost like it's almost like if you think about it, we've been so focused on what does $450,000 get you in Charleston, South Carolina, or wherever you're looking at, It
doesn't get you anything there.
It doesn't get you anything in Charleston because I know you love it there. But you and I've spent some time there together. But just somewhere, wherever it is, the typical ad that we see or the typical post we see is wondering what $600,000 gets you in whatever the city is. Well, nobody understands what $600,000 is payment wise. They don't understand those things. And so it's almost like if you go into, and I don't, but this is the way people think. If I go in, and you and I've told this story, I go into my local Chevrolet dealership and salesmen can be sold, right? And I walk in because I needed my AC replaced. Well, the guy that sold me the truck before, he sets me up. I mean, I said, hey man, my AC's out. I just need an old beater to drive around while y'all fix my AC because I need to have something to drive. He says, okay, I got some for you. Remember I told you this story? And so I drive up on the parking lot and it looks like MTV Cribs. He's got brand new Silverado trucks backed up front and says, which one do you want to take for these couple days? I said, no, man, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it. I'm not the guy. I don't want to buy a new truck. And he goes, oh, I know you probably don't. He said, but just drive it. He said, because I just looked up and, I looked up the Blue Book value of your house, of your car, of the truck you have. And I looked at how many payments you've got left. And for $200 a month, we would buy your existing truck from you. And for $200 more a month, you could have that brand new truck, which you've never bought a new truck as far as I remember, Jimmy. And I said, no, I haven't because I don't want to do that. And I don't want to buy a new truck. And he said, just drive it. And I literally get driving down the road and I'm like, ooh, wait a minute, and I start visualizing myself and I'm like, $200 a month, it's not that bad, I mean, and I got, so I called him back and I said, hey, man, I don't know. I'm going to talk to Tasha, talk to my wife. I don't think I want another one. He said, that's fine. I said, so just go ahead and put the AC in that one because y'all are going to do it or not, And he says, oh, we're not going to put that AC in that. I mean, that thing's probably going to have the transmission go out in 9 months. We're going to sell this thing at all. And I said, I know what you're doing. The whole point to this story is, you have to understand that we are in an environment, like you said, of why would I? I didn't go up there with it thinking I wanted to buy a new truck. But what he did is he said, why wouldn't you?
Right.
And so you have to get to that next step where we get people to understand that, hey, look, here's what it looks like to be able to visualize it. Guess what I'm driving right now?
I've drove it. I know. I saw it.
I know you. That's right. You did drive it when you were down here when I was working. Yeah. So literally, you have to understand the ability for you to have them visualize themselves, put themselves in that position and understand exactly what that looks like. You'll be amazed if you'll take that extra step, what that's going to do for you in the coming year. And so I think it's such a great point, what you brought up of just why would they?
I think the key here is what we're talking about, Jimmy, is being prepared for the conversation before you have it, right?
Right.
Know what you're going to say before you have it. Taking that why would I to why wouldn't I? The other one, and let's kind of maybe wrap on this. I know we were, going to kind of talk about this. And I think one of the questions that will come up that we need to be prepared for over, Christmas, Thanksgiving, we see all these folks is, hey, is this market going to crash? Is this going to crash?
Get that. Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things that will continue to come up in our business as we come out of the last several years. The other thing I'll say is you should expect, economic talk and which is heavily, influenced at the partisan level, right? If you voted for Trump, then you're fired up about the economy. If you didn't, you're pretty sure he's going to tank the whole thing, right? I mean, that's how this world works, in people's perspectives on it. And if you look at, voters, it's close to 50-50, right? We're going to run into folks that, believe one way or the other. There are a couple things that I think people should be aware of and be versed in. One, and let me do this. We haven't done this during this time. I'm going to share a couple slides on this one.
Please do.
And again, we'll give them to everybody, but here's the first one. I'm going to show this to you and just tell me you can see that so I can.
Got it.
You got it?
Can see it.
So here's what's this is a fact in the world. Consumer debt is at a record level in this country.
Wow.
Right. So if you think about turn on the news at night, somebody says, you know what, there's more debt in this country than ever. People get car loans, auto, credit cards, everything. It's at a record level. The majority of that, you can see right here in this orange, is mortgages. Then you got HELOCs on top of that, automobile loans, credit cards, student loans, medical, everything makes up that number right now. Now, here's the number that you need to commit to memory. It's this orange bar right here. If you can see my cursor, this is every quarter going all the way back to 2001. There's $13 trillion in this country right now of mortgage debt. $13 trillion. There was an article that came out a couple of years ago that said, Americans just passed $10 trillion in mortgage debt in this country, higher than it's ever been. And people sort of hear that and they're like, that doesn't sound good. Okay. $13 trillion is a lot of money, right? It's a big number. It is a fact that consumer debt's at an all-time high. Now, what's also a fact is this right here from the St. Louis Fed. There's 13 trillion in debt right there, but there's also 35 trillion in equity for a total of 48 trillion in value. Somebody says, sit at the Thanksgiving table, man, I wouldn't buy a house. Consumers are maxed out right now. There's more mortgage debt in this country than ever before. Right? That didn't feel good. It doesn't sound good. And so I think we have to be prepared for that. Of just knowing a couple numbers, right? 13 trillion, 35 trillion, 48 trillion in debt in this country and value in real estate. Nowhere near what it was back in the day. Now, if you look at this graphic, and I'm going to show you this in just one more turn in a second. This right here was the housing crisis. You can just see it visually. I put this one on my phone when I'm sitting at Thanksgiving. And I show my uncle that's running his mouth, this right here.
You got an uncle that runs his mouth, David?
I'll tell you what, Uncle Charlie,
Uncle Charlie? It's Uncle Charlie.
There was more mortgage debt in this country than there was equity back in 08. Here's a simple way to look at it. Back in the housing crisis on the left there, 9.7 trillion in debt, 8.8 trillion in equity. The look on the right is today, 13 trillion in debt, 35 trillion in equity.
Yeah.
So there's literally, there's not a case to be made for a crash. Somebody would say, well, this, that, or the other. The only one that I can think of, Jimmy, right now, it would have to on some level include aliens, right? I mean, if they come in and attack us, then we could see a housing issue. But we live in a strong market. We live in a strong market under the surface where there's a ton of equity. Most folks I think in our business know that, but I don't know that people have a good way of explaining it to people that they run into.
David, that last slide is the one. I'm sitting here thinking from an agent's perspective of the green screen video. I say, wondering if the market is strong or has the ability to move forward from here. Let me show you what a weak market looks like upside down. Let me show you what a strong real estate foundational market looks like
Yeah.
as far as debt compared to
Well, let me show you
actual.
what a crash looks like, and let me show you what
That's right.
today looks like.
Yeah, that's
You know what
good.
I
That's
mean?
really good. No, I think that is going to be the conversation that we have to set the tone as professional agents.
Yeah.
There is, I mean, we live in the world. It seems like every single person is out there talking about false information or misleading information or, all these things. We have to be that information source. And these slides that you just shared and the ones, look, if anybody wants these slides, I would just encourage you to do these. They can go to try KCM and get it. I mean, this is the time to be utilizing the tools and everything that Keeping Current Matters provides, in my opinion. This is why I'm a subscriber and have been forever, is because those type of slides that you just shared are the difference maker that sets the tone for the next year. I will say also, just in wrapping up, as we prepare and we're talking about some of these questions we're going to have over the next the rest of this year, how you answer those questions will determine how your first quarter looks,
Yep.
because we are now setting the stage for that time period. And our mutual buddy Jimmy Mackin said this. He said, if you aren't in their mailbox in November, odds are your sign is not going to be in the yard in March. Well, I would say if you're not dispersing this type of information now, November and December, your first quarter is not going to be all that it could be.
Yep.
So I've just encouraged people to be that information source. Anything you want to do to wrap us up, David, as we
No,
wrap this up?
I think grab these slides, Jimmy. You give a link for them.
Yeah.
Use them. Get them on your phone, and let's get the word out there.
Hey, everybody, we've been looking for clarity. Clarity is beginning to take shape. And the people who go now and go hard with the opportunity that they have in front of them as far as providing information, providing professional advice, utilizing these tools that are available, this is going to set the stage for a great year. I believe with all my heart, those professional agents that lean in right now have the ability to have one of their best years, if not their best year ever, in 2025. Thank you, David, for everything you do for the industry. And make sure you reach out, let David know how much you appreciate it. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for watching the video. I specifically chose the video below for you because it builds on the one you just watched. I hope it's helpful, and I'll talk to you soon.